Thank you so much for joining me this morning. This is something that, folks, we've been trying to get together for a while because I've been really, really curious about learning experience design, and so many of the TLDC community are, I've seen them go from instructional designers to learning experience designers. And so I did some research and I was like, where exactly is learning experience design coming from? And the more I dug into it, into design thinking and all these other concepts, especially last month when we did the UX playlist, of course, Niels' name was all over the place. And so I reached out to him. When I first reached out, it was right before LXD Con, which is an event that he was producing in Singapore. And so we didn't have time to get him on last month, but I'm so glad that he has some time this morning, and I'm happy to have you here, Niels.
Really happy to be here.
Yes. So let's get into it. Now, your bio, I want to know your backstory. And I think that whatever your backstory is going to contribute heavily to why you came up with learning experience design. So can you tell us a little bit of why you do what you do, how you came about to doing it? Just let our audience know.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everybody. I see quite a few people out there already. Hello from Georgia. So is that the state, Georgia, or the country?
It's more than likely the state.
Because I do know people from Georgia. I've been in contact with them, but from the country. But never mind. It's so yeah. So my background lies in different design disciplines. I was first trained as a graphic designer, and after that I went on to become an interaction designer. And I had been I started straight out of university. I started my own company, Shapers, which I still run, and I did all types of projects, about designing websites, creating games, all kinds of stuff that had to do with the graphic design and interaction design, but also educational projects. And quite a few years ago, I kind of ended up in education as well as a teacher. So I became a university teacher, and what I soon noticed is that my perspective as a designer on education was quite different. I thought, what type of experience could you offer to students that would benefit them more than maybe the basic solutions that they may come to expect, like a lecture or like just a standard assignment. So that got me thinking, and there was one specific project we did, which was an applied game for kids. And for some reason, the game that we created was really a huge success in the Netherlands. And it was quite a long time ago. It was still on a CD-ROM, so people had to get it physically. People were really excited about it, and not just the kids themselves, but also the parents, teachers, and everyone involved. So that really got me thinking about, this works, but we created it more intuitively. We didn't have a real plan on, how to make this educational and fun at the same time. We just tried, and, it worked. So I thought, I'm in education. I do educational projects. I'm a designer. So what is the best way to learn? And that's a question that doesn't have a single answer. So there is no single way that is best to learn. Some might say I prefer video, or someone else might say I prefer a book. But it really depends on the situation. So then I thought you need some kind of method to find the answer to this question for a specific situation. So if someone asks what's the best way to learn for this situation, you have a method that will help you get the right answer. And being a designer, I thought, well, you can use design methods to get to that answer. And then I had a very, very simple thought, but also a profound thought, which was we learn from what we experience. That's just a fact. And of course, not every experience is as educational as another experience, but we have to learn through experience. So what if you could design these experiences to learn from? That could be the method that you would have to find the answer to what is the best way to learn. So it all kind of tied in together. And then it kind of fell into place, and it was like, oh, so then it would be called learning experience design. And I thought, well, makes sense to me. So let's see who else is doing this. So I searched Google, I entered learning experience design, and there were exactly 0 results. So this is back in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of that's the whole story from me being a designer to becoming an educator, doing educational projects and tying it all in together within a different perspective. And but there was one big problem. There was a name, but there was no field of expertise yet. So that's kind of what I set out to do, to turn this idea that I had into an actual field of expertise.
Excellent. So it started out, it sounds like, not in adult education, but through sort of, was it like childhood type? It was younger people that you were educating initially?
Well, it was different groups of people, but we kind of noticed that for some reason, maybe in the Netherlands especially, but maybe also elsewhere, when it comes to innovation in learning, something fun and new and different, people think that let's try it with kids, and within the adult learning field, people tend to be a bit more conservative.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least that's my impression. So I know great stuff goes on there as well, but it's a bit more serious, and with kids you can have more fun. So there's a relation there between the type of projects we did and that specific group of age group.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this. So you have a formal design background, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but any formal sort of education background as far as no. That's interesting.
None at all.
Yeah, and that's a common thing that I'm seeing, especially with some newer sort of corporate trainers that I've met here in Northern California. Is they tend to typically have. I've met people that have say like communication degrees and language degrees and marketing degrees, design degrees that are actually doing training now. And it seems like having degrees in education are becoming not as common, at least to some of my peer groups that are here where I live and that I associate with. That's excellent. Okay,
yeah,
great.
But I did take a lot of time studying it myself, because when I thought I have the design side down and I know a thing or two about education, but like I said, most of the thing I did, also the teaching that I did, is quite intuitive, and it worked really well. But to design for someone else, that's a different matter. So you want to be able to understand what their need is, and so as a teacher, it was different than being a learning experience designer. So so I did learn a lot, but I'm still learning all the time. And that's one of the great things that, because there seems to sometimes be some kind of almost like a battle between learning experience design and instructional design. I think as a learning experience designer, you can learn a lot from an instructional designer and vice versa. So there are things that I know instructional designers are better at than I am, but probably also the other way around.
Right.
So so that's always my goal, to learn from other people. And if you have a team with a learning experience designer in it, you can also have an instructional designer there, and maybe like a subject matter expert, or like a psychologist, or even a philosopher or an artist. There's all kinds of people you could get in there.
I love it. And that was kind of like my next sort of series of questions. Is I'm wondering, what do you see as like some of the differences between an instructional designer and a learning experience designer? Just your opinion on that.
Well, I think that the main difference is that they are two different types of design. So for me, design, when it comes to learning experience design, is based on the design as an applied form of art. So it's really creative, it's highly creative, and it's really about the creative process and to come up with something original, different, and turn it into a reality, you know, something that didn't exist before and that you created. And I think instructional designers have a different type of design, which is more systematic, more scientific. And I think there's a great purpose for that. I mean, I have nothing, you know, I don't disagree with them, or don't have anything against instructional design. I think it's a different type of design, and they are more from the field of education. And I think learning experience design is more from the field of design as an applied form of art. So it's really about from what point you are looking at, from what area you are entering the field of learning experience design, as a designer or as an educator or an educational specialist.
Right. Excellent. So I'm going to get to one of these questions that I have here in the Q&A, and the one that I'm going to ask you is, it's right on the top here. It got voted up. What are your goals as a learning experience design pioneer?
Okay, that's a good question. And I'm just looking through the comments, and I see someone from South Africa, which is also great. And there's actually quite an active group of learning experience designers. I don't know if they know each other in South Africa or they're like dispersed, but there's a lot going on there. So that's great. So my goals, first of all, my goal was to design better learning experiences myself. So that was just, to serve my clients as a designer, and as a teacher to offer better experiences to my students. But soon it also became developing the field of learning experience design and promoting it. Because I thought, it's something I'm very passionate about. And I think it has great value for certain people to use learning experience design as a way to come up with better ways of learning and to kind of shape or redesign the way we learn. And I really started to focus on how can I reach people, inspire them, help them by offering them, training, tools, advice. So that's kind of what started to happen, and that kind of turned into a let's say a worldwide community of people. And right now my goal is to connect those people, to bring them together. And so instead of just developing the field of learning experience design, also helping people to connect, to learn from each other. And so that's what we're trying to do in different ways.
So if you are somebody that wants to be a learning experience designer, is there anything specific that you should be studying or like trying to accomplish to be able to be a learning experience designer? Do you need to have a design background, or how much? I mean,
that's a good question. I think when I train very different people with very different levels of expertise in either design or education, in the teaching, learning, instructional design. It's easier for me to teach a designer because the methods of working, the perspective is really from a designer. But then there's still a lot to learn about, what makes an experience educational, how do you actually learn from experience, and how do you use those insights and knowledge in combination with your skills of designing an actual experience. So I think that people want to... what's great about designers is that when they start on a project, they start from scratch. They have no preconceptions about what this experience is supposed to be like. And I think that's something that educators sometimes struggle with, because they're kind of used to certain formats or certain ideas about what learning might look like. So freeing your mind, opening your mind up to, anything is possible. Any type of learning experience can be designed. It doesn't have to be something that's already out there. It can be something completely different and new. And really starting to train your creativity to develop it. It's not because it's not a talent, creativity. It's something you can train, and that's something I've done in formal education, but that's something I've been doing my whole life. As a kid, I drew comic books, and that's I've been. It's something you just have to work on. So work on your creativity, generate loads of ideas, and just experiment, try it. I think that is the best starting point for people to get into learning experience design.
Excellent. So, and I think that what I've seen, some of the struggles that a lot of folks in this space sort of have is that instructional designers and trainers in general, especially on the adult ed side, have to be multidisciplinary, right? They have to have a variety of skill sets to be able to accomplish what they need to do for their organization. And I think, there are people sort of like Alan that's in chat right now who's highly skilled on the media side. And and he's a creative, for sure. And so I see him as somebody who would naturally gravitate towards being a learning experience designer versus just being a straight instructional designer. But is it so the idea of instructional design being focused primarily on building instruction versus learning experience design being focused on building learning experiences for the individual, is that like a primary concept that you feel kind of defines the two disciplines?
Well, that is a difference, and the problem is that because I've had many debates about this, and sometimes people really attack me online about because they think that they feel attacked themselves because maybe they feel like I think instructional design is inferior to learning experience design, which is not the case at all. I think there's a purpose and a need for both of them. But I think it's really a matter of focus. So if instruction is a big part, I design learning experiences where instruction is really just a minor aspect. If you design a game, you have some instruction about rules of the game, but once you start playing, it's really a completely different type of experience. And I design experience without, trainers or teachers involved, or something you can do just on your own. And so if you focus on what I focus on is very simple. I focus on the people, the learner, their goals, and the experience they are going to learn from. Mm-hmm. So my product, if you will, what I create is an experience, and so many people focus on, let's say, content delivery, or they focus on a certain curriculum, or like teaching aids or learning materials, stuff like that. Now, those are all part of a learning experience, possibly, but they are not the experience itself. So I really try to focus on what is this person going to experience. How are they going to enter this experience? What are they going through, and how will they get out of this experience? And how will this experience have changed them on a cognitive level, on a personal level, an emotional level?
Yeah, I totally agree. Excuse me. Well, let me ask a question here real quick from the Q&A. Sorry, still a lot of the smoke out here, but Mark asks a great question in the Q&A. Can you think of examples of instructional designers that are also learning experience designers? And do you feel that they are compatible as a career blend?
Wow. The thing is that instructional design is really huge in the United States, but I actually didn't hear about instructional design up until about 4 or 5 years and after I was already designing learning experiences. So to me, it was quite new. So in Europe, you have similar functions, but they have a different label or a different job description. But I think it really has to do with the person. Are they, I think anyone is, at least at a basic level, is creative. But, really focusing on the creative side and being able to, like I said, be free of of assumptions and preconditions about what learning is supposed to be like, and just being able to let go of what you know and trying new things, and applying a human focused design method, that makes all the difference. So I think instructional designers can move into the area of learning experience design if they are open to it. But in the same way, an interaction designer or a user experience designer or a teacher or a experience designer can all kind of find their way in there, but they all have different challenges to face. And I think for instructional designers, the biggest challenge is to probably be less systematic in their approach and more creative.
That's great. It seems like you could be an instructional designer with kind of like some learning experience design capabilities, or vice versa. And I do know that people that like are I've met lots of folks that I would consider like fantastic at building instruction, but also have like tremendous creative and design capabilities.
Yeah,
I could kind of see both. And I think it's really interesting that of course you're from the Netherlands, and not hearing about instructional design until just 5 years ago. That kind of allows you to sort of innovate outside of the rest of us here in the United States that I've only known about instructional designers. That's my entire career that I've been in this space. And you think this is just this is the path you have to go if you want to be a corporate trainer. You need to follow this path. But then I think that that not having that as sort of a constraint or a limitation help you design this whole thing. And especially even working with kids and being able to innovate that way. In chat earlier, a few people were discussing that, about how it is great to work with kids initially, because then you're allowed to sort of be more creative and innovate and find ways that you can establish learning outcomes in a way that you may have never done that before.
Well, let me just add something. There are 3 words in learning experience design. There's learning, experience, and design. And experience is kind of, that's something that everyone can claim, because, we all experience, we can all come up with experience, but you can look at it from, say, there's learning. So as an instructional designer, that's my forte. So it's really learning experience design is something that I would claim. But there's also design, and you can also claim it from a design perspective, but it's a design method. So that's more dominant. And I think, if you want to cross over, you have to let go, because you're no longer just, let's say, a user experience designer or a service designer or an instructional designer. It all ties in. And it's really hard that's the difference between a multidisciplinary field of expertise, where you just know there are like 4 or 5 disciplines that make up the combination. This is an interdisciplinary field where you can't really trace back specifically, this comes from user experience design, or this comes from graphic design, or this comes from instructional design. It's really a mix, and there's no need to kind of figure out where specifically everything came from in detail. It's just that it's grown into something new and different that's exciting, and what people seem to embrace as a way to improve what they're already doing.
Right. Oh, that's a great point. That is a great point. I love it. And so I am actually curious about that too. User experience design. Like last month, we did something about your user experience here on TLDCast. And so that in relation to learning experience design, do you see, what do you see the connections there?
Yeah. So the main difference between user experience design and learning experience design is that you can't just change the word user for learner, because user experience design is really focused on the digital domain. And to design an experience for people online, that's the primary focus. And learning is something that happens everywhere, and anytime, anywhere you can learn. So designing an experience that may be completely different from designing, let's say, the user experience of buying a book online. You have similar principles, but the results are completely different. So I think there's a lot to learn from user experience designers as a learning experience designer, and primarily the method you use to work, also with doing user tests and working in an iterative process, stuff like that. But you really have to be able to think outside of the digital domain, and learning experiences can be way more complicated than user experiences often.
Excellent. All right. Awesome. This is great stuff. Now I wanted to ask you, this learning experience canvas. Can you tell us about that? What exactly is that?
Yeah, so it's basically a tool that gives you an overview of all the elements that come into play when you design a learning experience. So when I created it, it was simply my goal I had all these different separate ideas, concepts, and models lying around, or that I created or that I found, and I was kind of trying to tie into something that would work as a whole. So I thought, how can I take kind of what's happening in my head creatively and also on an analytical level, and I make it more external, make it something that people can be a part of. So when I design a learning experience, it's not just what happens in here, but it's also something that you can do together with a client, with a team. And so I wanted the tool to do that, and that's kind of how this learning experience canvas came to be. And since people in my network really, they thought it was a cool tool to use for them as well, they asked me if I would share it, which is what I did. So people can download it for free. And that's kind of what it took on a life of its own.
It's the one that's at lxcanvas.com?
That's lxcanvas.com.
Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
For everybody.
And there it is. So you asked earlier about my goals as a pioneer in this field, and if you want people to be able to design learning experiences, you also need to give them the tools to support them. And I think this canvas can really help people. So it took a long time for people to find out about it. I just created a small website, put it online, and left it there. And it took about 1.5 years to get to 100 downloads, and now it's about 5, 6, 7 downloads a day. And it's been downloaded by about over 5,000 people already, and probably more people know about it, just by sharing. So that kind of that's something that also helps people to get a better understanding of learning experience design, because it's just, when you look at the canvas, it's all there, all the elements are there, and you have to you can't just leave some of them out because they're all there. So it's really kind of forcing you to think about the diversity of learning experience.
Excellent. So, and I'm going to follow up with this question. And by the way, everybody, if you have any questions at all, just go to the Ask a Question section on the bottom of your browser window and just pop a question in there if you have any questions for Niels. Mark,
I have to get an adapter for my laptop, by the way. I'm very sorry. I had to just grab it for 1 second, make sure my battery doesn't die.
Go ahead.
1 second. Yeah, sorry.
It's funny how actually this happens more frequently than I ever thought it would, where folks have to grab their charger. And so again, if you guys have any questions at all, pop them into the Q&A section of the Crowdcast interface, and I'll ask Neil those questions. Just excited to have them on here. And if you guys have any other comments in chat, feel free to post them in there. I'll read them out loud and get them into the audio only version of this podcast. Alan, you're guilty of the charger cord dilemma. I agree, Mark. A great user experience could be having devices with longer battery life.
I really, really like the comments, and that people come from all these different places, and that they're so involved in this. Yeah, I'm enjoying this.
Excellent. I want to just follow up with this one because we were talking about the LX Canvas. Can you recommend any other resources on learning experience design or human-centered design?
Well, that's a good one. I kind of live in my own bubble sometimes because I'm kind of working on my own stuff all the time. Yeah, well, I think I also created learningexperiencedesign.com as a kind of a starting point for people to get some information about learning experience design that could be helpful. And I think there are some people use empathy maps as a tool, which can work really well. I'm actually working on a similar type of model, which is not an empathy map, but it is a way to get a better understanding of your audience. And also personas are also a great way to tools to work with. And yeah, so, I know some people are into design thinking, which is kind of related to being a designer, but not which is kind of designed for non-designers. But I think if you look at the basic steps you take as a design thinker or a designer, that can also help you to work in a different way, more creatively, and also more iteratively. Is it a word, iteratively?
Works for me. Can you tell us a little bit about Shapers?
Yeah, well, so it's a company I started right after I graduated from art school, being a master of interaction design. And it's kind of evolved the same way I did from an interactive design agency to a learning experience design agency. And the projects we do, so we do three things. We design learning experiences for clients, which is mostly done within the Netherlands because it's easier to work, with people that can be that are close to you in terms of distance. And but also we train people, and that's more international. So I get requests from different parts of the world to come over to do training, and also sometimes people come over from all parts of the world to do training in the Netherlands. So it's kind of a mix internationally of people that I train. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that we for promoting learning experience design, we organize events like LXD Con. The last one was in Asia, in Singapore. And before we're going to do our fifth one in the Netherlands, and we've done 3 in Asia.
That's really interesting, and let's get to that. There's actually a really great question from Ashanti in the Q&A, but I want to ask about that, the global piece of it, right? Mm-hmm. So have you done much work in the United States at all as a learning experience designer, like with Shapers or anything?
No, not really. It's a big country, and while it's we have if we look at the list of people that downloaded the learning experience canvas, most of them are in the United States. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest part. But what I've learned is that, when we prepared for this, we talked about how different parts of the world have different challenges in a way, different perspectives. I think learning and development is rather business oriented in the United States, and in the Netherlands, for instance, it's very normal to have a business side, but also more like the education side and having universities involved in your work and stuff like that. So it's not really separated that much. Mm-hmm. And maybe if you go more to the east, for instance, in Asia, I think there's also business, but people are really more focused on formal training and learning, in schools and stuff. So it's a bit it's a bit more traditional in that sense.
So when you're doing LXD Con, which is your conference, and I'll ask you a little bit more about that, but
Yeah.
is it primarily, would you say that it's more academic oriented, or is it business oriented?
Well, it's a mix. Yeah. So we really try to have people come over from all aspects of learning experience design. So whether you're a teacher or an instructional designer or an artist or a scientist, or all those types of people they come to these conferences. And as diverse as they are, they all have one thing in common, which is that they see learning experience design as a way to improve the way we learn. And whether you're doing that, like if you're a neuroscientist, or if you're a psychologist or you're a teacher, you all have different goals maybe, and different situations that you work in, and different people you work for, but the principles remain the same. And these are all people that are very passionate about learning and about the people that they serve.
That is really, really compelling, because I think that last week is a great example of sort of the dynamic that we have here in the United States, where in Las Vegas, there were two really large conferences going on at the same time. DevLearn, which is an event, and AECT, which is an academic event. And they were both happening the same week in two separate places.
Yeah.
And so, there were some folks, like, for instance, Kara North, who were having to go back and forth to each. And and Josh definitely knows this. He's been around, but they were residing in two separate places completely. And it's not often that you see both groups like coming together under the same roof, which I think is probably, different in Europe and Asia. And I'd love to hear if Joe Cook is still in, or anybody else from the UK or other places of Europe, if they have any opinion on that. But see, there you go. At Online Educa in Berlin, they do that well. And that's great to hear, because I would favor that too. Now, I've got the big question from Ashanti here. What role do you see learning experience design play in creating a culture of learning in the workplace?
Okay, so workplace, yeah. I think having human-centered design is a vital aspect of learning experience design. So focusing on people first and their needs and supporting them in their personal development, that's key. So I think if you design for people to learn from an experience, you want to change not only their knowledge and their skills, but also their perception, their insights, and also their behavior. So I think as a learning experience designer, you can, because people need to, for all kinds of reasons, they need to continue to learn and to develop themselves as professionals and as individuals. And I think by focusing more on the people and how you can support them, and I think they will have a different attitude towards learning and be more willing to learn, and see the value of not only what they need to learn, but also why they need to learn and why it matters to them personally and how it can improve their lives. So it's really not just a matter of what you have to learn, but also why it's important.
Interesting. So do you think, so it sounds almost like learning experience design just can naturally lead to a positive sort of learning culture within an organization if it's successfully implemented?
I think that people by nature want to learn. Anyone enjoys mastering something new, whether it's something very simple or something very complicated. If you learn to play the piano, that's great. If you learn like a small trick, that's great. But often people are not inclined to learn because they don't see why it matters to them, And I think by empathizing with people and offering them an experience that gets them excited and motivated, that will change their behavior. And once they are more, eager to learn, that will definitely change the culture as well within an organization. If people are more, they feel inspired, they feel energized, they want to, get better at what they do. They want to get better at, doing things together. I think that's a very important part.
Yeah, that's very profound. That's great. So Ashanti is asking, when's the next LXD Con? And can you tell us just a little bit more about LXD Con?
Yeah, well, LXD Con is our way to it's like a warm bath for anyone related to learning experience design. And that's the feedback we get, that people who come there, very different backgrounds, like I said, from scientific to artistic to anywhere in between. And they feel like finally there's a place where you find different people, but they are still like-minded with a passion for learning, for people. And so that's really that's one of the goals of us, just to have that feeling of belonging in those events. And second, it's also a place where people can learn a lot. So it's really highly interactive. We have few lectures, we have many workshops. So we want to make sure that people apply learning experience design instead of just talking about it or thinking about it.
That's interesting. So it sounds like it'd be a really interesting event because it's produced by designers.
Yeah.
I know that events that I typically go to would be, they're produced typically by media types or by, people that build instruction versus somebody that is really, really focused on design. That's really, really interesting. So the next one, when is that going to be? Do you guys have a schedule?
Yeah. So this is something that isn't even official yet, but so there's a, I can share it. Our goal is to have the next one in the Netherlands in June, next June.
Okay.
And we don't have a definitive date yet, but we are going to do that. But in the long run, it's definitely one of my goals to do an LXD Con in the United States.
Okay.
And I have talked to people about it, and there's going to be stuff happening there, but that's a bit too early I'm not quite sure when that might happen. But the Asian conference is really focused on the Asian region. But the conference in Europe, in the Netherlands, is really, we have people from all continents there. So so we're going to continue to do that. But hopefully 2021 we'll do one in the United States.
Okay, excellent. And, of course, TLDC produces an annual event. We're still locking down our next location, which I have lots of conversations sort of like burning in the fires right now. And who knows, maybe we can get Niels to come and join us at our next conference. All right. And it looks like there's some excitement here, too. And Joe Cook is saying that if you'd like a UK media partner, she's the deputy editor of Training Journal magazine. So you should definitely connect with Joe if you can.
Yeah, I must say that I'm having a hard time reading all the comments and thinking about the questions at the same time that you're asking me. So I'm not a multitasker. I don't think anyone is, but never. But so for anyone, right here in the comments, if you want to send me a message or anything, just if you visit my Shapers website, I'll just put it out there. You can find an email address there, or I'll just add my email address as well.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Niels. Yeah,
so because I get quite a few questions from people, just and I like to help people if I have time. I like to help them. So it's an opportunity for me to learn as well about the things that people struggle with or that they typically enjoy. So I always love to hear feedback and have questions.
I'm so happy that you were able to make time for us today, Niels. I know that learning experience design is huge here in the United States. I mean, I'm seeing just this massive sort of shift, and I do believe the reasons why are that people, it really speaks to what a lot of people in our space, what their goals are as educators, where that a lot of them are very creative. They do love to focus on design, and ultimately the learning outcomes are the same as, like, like, say, an instructional designer, but they feel like the design piece is a lot more appropriate for them individually, and so the role of the learning experience designer is more relevant to them. And so I want to thank you for coming in today. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Everybody can see that Niels's information is in there. Are you on social media at all? Do you do Twitter? Do you do anything else, LinkedIn or anything?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Twitter. That's it. No Facebook or Instagram or stuff like that. Just mainly LinkedIn, but and email.
Okay. And Niels, if there's anything that the training, learning, and development community can do to help support your efforts as a learning experience design pioneer, just let us know. Really happy to have you here today. And thanks everyone for popping in. We'll have we'll have the recording out soon, and also get the chat transcript out to everybody too, because there were a lot of great questions in there. And with that, everybody have a great Friday. Have an excellent weekend. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, Niels.